Hello, all you beautiful people. Brian here for Work to Game, and today I want to talk to you about the future of Final Fantasy. Namely, since Final Fantasy XV's release is behind us, Stormblood's ahead of us, where do I see the Final Fantasy series going? So especially with and how it relates to Final Fantasy XVI. What do we want for Final Fantasy XVI? What do we want it to be? What do we expect it to be? There's a lot of expectation riding on any release of Final Fantasy, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. By now, and without spoiling Final Fantasy XV for you, the game feels like it's this two-sided coin. So the first half is this awesome road trip, and the second half feels like it's lost its direction, and it really was unfinished. And I kind of bring up that point, but without spoiling it, that's the general consensus that's going on around the web. It's a great game, but when you compare it to other games in the series, it's okay. It's just an okay game. And so where should that have an impact? What lessons do we hope that they take from Final Fantasy XV? But besides the game and the story, what elements like the action combat system, the Ascension grid, what do we hope that the future Final Fantasies kind of take from this game? So like every Final Fantasy has an influence on the series overall, while they each stand alone on their own. Obviously things like Chocobos, Moogles, and things like that all have an influence, on games that come from them. So I'm just kind of curious, and especially, as to what from Final Fantasy 15 is worth making part of the series as a whole. I'm curious about your thoughts too, so please sound off in the comments below about what you think future Final Fantasies should take from 15 going forward. So Final Fantasy 16 is a reality. It's going to be a game that is announced and eventually comes out, hopefully not having us wait for years and years and years to get our hands on the game. But we can speculate that it might have something to do, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, with Agni's philosophy. It was a real-time Final Fantasy tech demo that they showed off to highlight the Luminous engine back in like 2012 or something of that nature. Final Fantasy 15 was actually built on the Luminous engine, and some have speculated that's one of the reasons why the game had so much trouble in development in the first place. Now, Versus 13 wasn't, but when they started the Final Fantasy 15 project, they built it up on the Luminous engine. Now, real-time tech demos aren't games, but I'm sure with Final Fantasy 16, we're going to continue to see Square Enix push for that visual superiority that they do with the Final Fantasy series as a whole. But I want or hope that with Final Fantasy 16, we're going to see Square Enix do something that they haven't actually done in quite a while. After Final Fantasy 7 and 8, Square Enix did something with Final Fantasy IX that I didn't expect. They took a step in a different direction, and they took the series more back to its roots. So 7 and 8 had a person party system. So with 9, they brought it back to the more traditional 4. They didn't necessarily have the real-to-life, kind of graphics, or at the time for the PlayStation, so they had a little bit more sprite-based, I guess to describe it, for the PlayStation, even still in 3D, kind of with a little bit bigger heads, and just a little bit more kind of characteristic and cartoony side of it. It had a very endearing story, very interesting and fun characters for the series, and it ended up going on to be one of the highest rated Final Fantasy games to date. In fact, Metacritic still has it as the highest rated Final Fantasy game that they've released in the mainline series, scoring it at a 94, where like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy XII, and other games come in at around 92. So they did something absolutely right with Final Fantasy IX. So should Final Fantasy 16 be one of those Final Fantasies that look back at its roots? I'm interested in your thoughts, so let me know in the comments below if that's what you want to see. As for me personally, I don't know if it's necessarily needed or required, because we already kind of have Bravely Default, which, even though it doesn't have the Final Fantasy name, really is a amazing Final Fantasy game. And then you have Bravery Second as well for the Nintendo 3DS. Maybe we can get something for the Switch. Maybe we can see that those games make it off of the handheld and into I guess a more traditional style controller. That would be something that I would like to see, but I don't know if necessarily we need to go very far back in terms of roots for this series, because we can already get that fix from Square Enix in another series they've already currently established. Personally, I think that also Final Fantasy XV could have been a game that surpassed all the other Final Fantasies. The only issue ended up being is that I felt like the ending of the game ended up being rushed. And this most likely tied into the fact that it was built off of the concept of Versus 13. So Versus 13 was announced in 2006, and so that's everybody kind of assumed 10 years later that the game, was still in development, when in fact it had been canceled and Final Fantasy 15 was taking its place and building off some of the lore and what they've shown off in the past. That ended up being real, I think, unfortunate as to why they felt like the game needed to come out in 2016, aside from any kind of contractual obligations that they had made to whomever. But for the most part, I think Final Fantasy 15 had baked in it like these really great concepts. The only problem is not to review it here or to spoil it anywhere else, it just was unfinished. It was disconnected. And Final Fantasy 15 would have benefited from 6 to 12 more months of development time. And with the DLC and the free content updates that they've already announced for the game running through 2017, it's kind of hard to say that the game is finished. I'm kind of curious as to see if we're going to see some of the biggest concerns patched into the game at a later date. And if so, could that completely change how we see Final Fantasy games going forward? And this brings me to my final thought. With Stormblood on the horizon, With Stormblood on the horizon, it makes me really feel that Final Fantasy XIV has been one of the best Final Fantasy games to come out in the last 10 years. Now, I know they're out there who, don't like MMOs and don't like games that you have to have a subscription for, and with those two excuses, it does keep a lot of people away from Final Fantasy XIV, which is unfortunate. So, if you're one of those people, I'd highly encourage you to take a look at Final Fantasy XIV, namely just for the fact that it is such a great game, and you might find something that surprises you about it that you weren't aware of at this point. But Final Fantasy XIV is a game that continues to evolve and to grow and to develop. So we've got 4.0 coming out this summer, but if for anybody who was around, if you remember 1.0, the game was horrible. And so then they redid it, they fixed it, and 2.0 came out, and they really, to help, salvage the brand of Final Fantasy. Could 15 as well be doing that same kind of roadmap? Could we see that happening with Final Fantasy 16? That's pretty much how games kind of work in today's environment, and for good or bad, it is just the nature of it. We are in this connected world, and we can get those content updates. I don't necessarily know if that's the right way to go about it. Sometimes it can lead to, we'll patch it later, and that's one of the things that hurt Final Fantasy XIV in the beginning. But with Final Fantasy 15, there is this solid core of a game. You could easily see that if they were able to kind of piece together the missing pieces, that we could have such a game that, when people come in and play it or replay it, that they can have that great experience. Not everybody's already played the game. They've, I think, announced that over 6 million units, physical and digital, have been sold, which is great, and that's fantastic for that game. Thus obviously ensuring that a Final Fantasy XVI is still on the way. So here's my personal wish list for Final Fantasy XVI. This is, I don't know necessarily if any of this would ever be possible, but this is just some of my notes that I would like to see with the next mainline entry into the Final Fantasy series. I would love to see them bring back Sakaguchi to direct or to produce this game. He's over there and he's starting a new game studio, like Dream or Dawn Walker. Maybe he's got time, I don't know. Maybe he's busy and doesn't want to come back, but I think it would be really cool to bring back some of the, the Dream Team from the past to help contribute to Final Fantasy XVI. And I hate to say it because I'd hate for Final Fantasy XIV to lose him, but I would love to see what Yoshi-P could do with a mainline series like Final Fantasy XVI. Whatever role he would play, if it would be a director position or something of that nature to work alongside with Sakaguchi, that would be amazing. At the same time, I wouldn't want 14 to suffer. So he talked about finding some type of replacement for him, and I would obviously want to support that, to have that mantle being carried on so that we continue to get amazing content updates for Final Fantasy XIV. The world of Agni's philosophy looks interesting. Some of the stuff that they showed off, as part of the world, the slums, and then this very technological world, kind of sitting next to each other or something of that nature. Looks interesting, and if not that, man, I would return to the world of Ivalice. It's such a rich world environment for telling so many different stories. That would be my vote for kind of setting, in my opinion, one of those two. And if with the battle system they're only going to give us one playable character with AI combatants, please give us the gambit system or something where we can really kind of tailor out how we want them to function. That was my biggest complaint with 15. I still am waiting for it in Final Fantasy 14. I like the system. I think it's a solid system, and hopefully 16, if they go that way, would support it. And lastly, don't tell us about the game until you're very close for it to be ready. With Final Fantasy VII probably not coming out this year, the remake or part 1 or whatever, just be quiet about it. Be like, hey, here's this game, Final Fantasy 16, this fall. Don't build up our hype and our expectations so much over years. Just get the game ready, make it really exciting, and then announce it to the world. You've got plenty of other games and projects to keep us busy. That I don't know if it will happen. I know that especially everybody likes to get that hype and that announcement, but we've seen a trend, at least it feels like it recently, where we've seen these games for years and years and years and they never come out, or they come out and they're just not that great. And so you kind of that's been, I think that sums up 2016, and they even canceled the game Scalebound, and they just announced that now, and I think they've been showing that off on the Microsoft stage for the last 3 years. So for 16, just be quiet about it. Get us excited when it's within a reasonable amount of time to get that game out to us. So with Stormblood releasing on June 20th, I'm sure that E3 this year is primarily going to be focusing in on Stormblood and Final Fantasy XIV, as well as their various other projects. We'll probably see some more Final Fantasy VII remake, but I doubt that we'll hear anything about Final Fantasy XVI at least until E3 2018. I don't actually think that's that far away. Time seems to go really fast sometimes. But for the most part, that's my prediction, that we will first start to hear more about Final Fantasy XVI sometime next year. So with that, what are your wish list items for Final Fantasy XVI? Do you want to see the action combat stay or return to a more traditional style combat like Final Fantasy X or 12, or even Bravery Default for the mainline series? Let me know and sound off in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, you can hit that thumbs down button as well. If you haven't subscribed to us, please hit subscribe. We'd love to have you in our community. And if you already are subscribed, thanks for subscribing and coming back. We're really glad you're here. My name's Brian, and this is Work to Game. I'll hopefully catch you in my next video. And until then, have a great day.